Welcome to Game Over Montreal. You know what? I went into the solo screen. I was gonna bring Jared in right away, but let's bring Jared in right away right now because we don't need to do a big preamble. That sucked. That wasn't fun. I think going into the third period, it could have been a decent game, but that was not fun. Jared, welcome to the show. Glad to have you back. Uh, the Canadians played, I would argue, their best first period in a very long time, like since the Bruins game, maybe. But you could tell that they're not as good as the Florida Panthers. We'll say right now. Uh, Obviously, we're going to talk about Kaden Primo tonight. I think that'll be our whole second segment. But for the start, I just want to talk about the rest of the players on the ice in this game. I'm just going to throw out there what I saw, and then you tell me if you agree or disagree. From my perspective tonight, I think the Canadians were the better team outside of when it comes to shooting. The Panthers played a very simple game. They gained the zone, one or two passes, shoot. One or two passes, shoot. They weren't necessarily looking for great scoring chances. The Canadians didn't give them that many great scoring chances in this game, but the Canadians would gain the zone, hold on to the puck, play themselves out of good positions, and then shoot it when they no longer had anything to shoot for, and continually overpass the puck all night long. They did get some good chances, at least in the power play in the first half of the game there, but again, Sergei Bobrovsky was really good, but I don't think that they made him work that hard either. For this team going forward, I do think there has to be some level of focus on just shoot, like simplify the game. And one play in the third period, I think, summed it up for me. I forget who had the puck. It was one of the Canadians players. It was either Armia or maybe it was Tanner Pearson. And I appreciate patience with the puck, but when you have the puck in a shooting position and you're looking for a pass, and then you wait and you wait and you wait, and then there's nobody open, and then you just take a shot, just fire that puck as soon as you get it, man. Like, the Canadians are so hesitant to throw the puck at the net, and I don't understand why. And you see the dividends that it pays off if you can get a goaltender rattled by the way that the Florida Panthers played tonight.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the goal that Montreal did score, right? That's not a good scoring chance. It's not a good goal by any stretch of the imagination, but
Good play
things
from
like that.
Caulfield, but yeah.
Yeah, great play by Caulfield. That was a 10 to 10 play. Absolutely great play. But I mean, that's a shot that should be saved,
Yes.
10 times out of 10. And it almost was. He got a good piece of it. But it went in. But I mean, yeah, it's little things like that are things that I think will come with this team. Like I don't want to say that it doesn't matter right now, but it doesn't matter right now. There's bigger things that they have to deal with than. But I think it's something to focus on down the road. But I think that right now, the focus is trying to play that Martin St. Louis style of trying to see where people are and play off of that. But I think there's something to be said about just shoot the puck when you have when you have an opportunity. I mean, Nick Suzuki in that third period had a wide open net. I know he's trying to get Josh Anderson a goal. Like, that's clearly what he was trying to do there. He knew who was there, but the best chance to score there is him to shoot right away.
Yeah.
And he didn't. But not that it's not going to matter in a game that ended 5-1 in the end. But I mean, things like that will add up. And if the game was closer, obviously it makes a big difference. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell what this team's philosophy is, and that's not a knock on Martin St. Louis or the team. It's just that there's so many other priorities right now that I don't think that they're focusing on that, and rightfully so. Like, the focus right now is on trying to get people on the same page and things like that, and then you fine tune when you're, you know, down the road. But also at the same time, we're entering year three of Martin St. Louis, or second full year, I guess. But it's just it's going to matter, but they can grow into it as well, and take notes on what works and what doesn't, and try things. And It's a smart group, right? It's a smart group of players, a smart group of coach Martin St. Louis is a smart guy. He's not dumb. And I think that eventually they're going to learn what works and what doesn't. But I think that when you're struggling to score, you kind of go against just shooting, right? Because you're like, oh, shooting's not going to work. We have to make the perfect play, and I think that plays into it as well, confidence and things like that. But yeah, I mean, Florida shows what good teams can do when you control a puck. You don't need to get the
Yeah.
perfect scoring chance, just volume. Like goalies in the NHL aren't great. Like, I mean, they're great, but I mean, they're not invincible. Like, if you shoot on them enough, and today, I mean, it's not like Primo and Bobrovsky are two of the best in the NHL. But more
Some would
often than
argue
not,
Bobrovsky is, but it seems to be on a year, off a year.
I mean, at times he is, but I mean, does that really count? I don't know, but um, it just seems like if you do that often enough in the NHL, you're probably going to score some goals just because the goalie's going to screw up or it's going to get a bounce or whatever. Um, you saw it on Kovacevic's goal today. So, I mean, yeah, you can simplify the philosophy, but I think that the instinct when you're not scoring and the forwards for the Canadians have not been scoring, um, that's the instinct is to we have to be perfect. And I think that that's kind of what the instinct play takes over in a case like that.
Yeah, and I think in this game, more than not scoring, I think the biggest issue was that the forwards weren't shooting. Uh,
No,
a lot of those patient plays that the Canadians make, which listen, like I said, sometimes patience is good. I think when it comes to like Nick Suzuki, patience is really good. One of the best things that Suzuki's able to do is just get in the way and stick with plays. He'll make a mistake. There was a few times tonight where he went for a pass, it got blocked, and then he somehow got the puck back anyway because he just finds a way to patiently outweight opponents, whether they have the puck or he has the puck, and find a play, right? But for a lot of this team's issues when it comes to shooting, it ends up being the defensemen who have the puck with somewhat of a shooting lane and they get frustrated and take the lowest percentage shot. And this happens a lot with teams that struggle with scoring, of course, but like they scored 4 last game. They shouldn't be, thinking about the LA game, right? And this
right.
wasn't the LA game. They had chances, especially in the first 2 periods there. I thought on the power play they had some really, really great chances. Uh, Ulinen had a fantastic chance that he just couldn't quite corral. So like there's things that went against them tonight as well on top of that third period that just went off the rails with Kaden Primo, and we'll talk about that later. I also want to talk about the new hook injury later and potential fill-ins. That'll probably be our last segment before we get to the questions from our loyal, amazing viewers. Um, but yeah, make sure you like the stream if you're here. It always helps us. Subscribe to SDPN, all that fun stuff. I don't blame anybody for not tuning in tonight because I get it. I would be frustrated if I was living and dying with the wins and losses. I'm frustrated even though I'm not. That game was frustrating to watch, And then you have Dave Poulin, who on if you're watching on TSN is just I don't know what the Habs did to deserve having him on almost all of their broadcasts when they have like Mike Johnson and Cheryl Pounder there for other teams. They need like it's that and the injuries lift the damn curse because it's so annoying. I've never heard a guy who looks like he just doesn't watch the game that he's commentating. It's crazy. But there were several times tonight where like the stupidest thing would be called and he's like, "Oh yeah, great call by the refs." Or like Suzuki without the puck gets hammered from behind. Dave Poulin's like, yeah, it makes sense not to call that because he was just anticipating the play. It's like, yeah, because he doesn't have the goddamn puck, Dave. You can't do that. You can't hit guys like that. So I think that combined with the way that the Panthers play, which is dirty by design. I think that if you look back at the Paul Maurice Jets, they kind of played the same way. This is what they do. The Canadians kind of played through that pretty well for the first 40 minutes, got their power plays, didn't score, but then things fell apart in the third. I'm rambling a little bit here, but it was a frustrating game to watch because I think they didn't deserve to win. I'll say that because the Florida Panthers are just a better team, even if the Canadians played well. but they didn't deserve a 5-1 loss, I think. And then you had the injury on top of it. I don't blame any Canadiens fan for being like really upset after this one.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the shooting thing, and I think it was Arpin who had a post uh about that, like the Canadiens only had two shots from their top six forwards in the game, one from Suzuki, one from Gallagher, and that was like midway through the third period. So I mean, yeah, your forwards are supposed to score. The odds are if you pass it back to the D, it's a lower percentage chance than what you had in the first place. So it just goes to what the kind of like philosophy is when they're on the ice, and the instincts is to try and find space, and that usually that when a team collapses, the D is going to be open. You saw that on the basically the Caulfield play to Kovacevic. You had four guys on Caulfield, and the D was all alone. I mean, that's the play you want to make, but at the same time, it's not an ideal situation to have him being the one shooting the puck either. So yeah, I mean, it's frustrating because if this game was last year, I don't think it's as frustrating. But this year we have seen how good this team can be. And for 40 minutes they were in the game with the Panthers, who are a good team. And then they just didn't show up in the third period. And it's not, Primo, the early goal, 8 seconds in, is a big part of that. But at the same time, you want to see a little bit more pushback, and that just didn't happen. And it's back-to-back games. Florida was in Montreal, I think, last night already, like waiting for them, which is not ideal. But I mean, it's frustrating. But yeah, I don't think they necessarily deserve to win. But if you look at the score, I mean, they didn't deserve to lose like that either.
No, no, not at all. Especially like the Florida Panthers had a pretty decent edge on the flow of play at even strength, but honestly, I would argue a big reason for that is that they got away with a ton of horribly obvious calls, like tons of them. Even when it was 4-1, and there was one play in the third period there. Right before they called Gallagher for goaltender interference, I think, when Caulfield was hooked so badly that he was like perpendicular to the ice. His upper body was pulled back so bad. And then right after there is when Suzuki got hit from behind by Kulikov, I want to say. Maybe no, it was Ekman Larson. And he didn't have the puck. And then right after that, they call a ridiculous call on Brendan Gallagher, who gets pushed into a goalie. And hey, it's Brendan Gallagher, so you got to give the reputation call. It's a weird one because the Canadiens did have the big advantage in terms of power plays, but I feel like it wasn't even big enough considering how things were called in that game. And the Canadiens got away with several as well, but the officials were terrible in this one. Whether it was bad icing calls or missed calls or bad calls, it's a consistent problem that adds to the level of frustration. And then there's the injury on top of it all. If you're looking for positives, though, because I saw that somebody in the chat as soon as I started the show was like, "Cheer us up!" I think it was Trinka. Yeah, Andrew, make us feel better. That's what it was. I would say if you're looking for a positive, this is the best game from Sean Monahan in a long time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's a guy that's kind of been struggling, right? After a strong start to the season. And it's kind of funny because when the team is struggling, and the team as a whole kind of has been struggling lately, wins in games aside, and so when a whole team is struggling, the individuals struggling don't get this as much attention, unless they're glaringly obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And Monahan hasn't been obviously bad in terms of obvious giveaways and things like that stand out in a game. He's just kind of been there, and so yeah, it's nice to see him take a step up, especially if Alex Newhook is out. What's I don't want to speculate, but it didn't look like a short-term injury.
No, it did
Um,
not.
so if he's another top six forward out, then you're gonna have to look for guys to step up, and Monahan is that obvious one. And obviously, the better he plays, the more value he can have at the trade deadline. And it's not too early to look towards that. Obviously, with his injury history, it might be a little too early to look towards that. But at the same time, I mean, it's you have to, it's good to see players step up because they're going to need somebody. Like it's not going to be, it can't be as bad as last season, as I knock on wood here, but
I mean,
eventually guys are going to have to step up.
yeah, we're
When
gonna have to talk about who's gonna step in here
yeah,
in the last segment, but let's talk about Kaden Primo. And again, if you're joining us now, please like the stream and subscribe to SDPN. Hit that notification bell. Make sure that you get all your notifications when SDPN posts videos and all that jazz, and help us grow. Grab the link, share it on Twitter or whatever other social media that you enjoy, and we'll have some fun as more people join in here. Uh, Alexander Christian says that Martin McGuire is going off on the refs on 98.5. Yeah, I don't doubt that. Deservedly so. And again, it's not about they needed to be better for the Canadiens. They're just shit for the Panthers too. Like, I'm sure Panthers fans are upset at how that game was officiated, just like the Canadiens fans are, 5-1 or not. But Caden Primo, I think we disagree on this, Jared. But if I was running the Canadiens right now, with the way that he came out in that third period, to me, there's really no excuse. He had a day in Montreal alone to prepare. He looked good for the first 40 minutes. He did not come out for the third prepared to play. And allowing the one goal is brutal. That really takes the wind out of the sails right off the hop. Allowing two more quick ones on, like, easily stoppable ones too. Like the Evan Rodriguez shot was an absolute banana that he waved at. There's no way that should go in on an NHL goalie. I'm throwing in the towel on him. I would be putting him on waivers tomorrow morning. I think that there's very little chance that he gets claimed because of his contract is pretty big for an American Hockey League goaltender, and other teams, whether they need a goaltender or not. Like I just don't see him as being someone that they look at as a solution at this stage in his career. But he's probably better than anybody who's in Laval right now, and they need some goaltending. So send him where he can get some reps. And if the Canadiens end up trading a goaltender, they can call him back up.
I don't disagree with the premise, but I think that the downside of him getting claimed, as small as that is, outweighs any benefit of sending him down and things like that. Because, yes, is counting three goalies bad on a roster? Yes, it's not ideal. But neither is having Jakub Dobeš as your only call-up option if he gets claimed. Because he is clearly he putting him as the third goalie right now in the organization and the only other option for a call-up is the same thing as what they did to Primo 2-3 years ago, where they had no other option. They had to call him up. He had a 800 save percentage, and they were stuck, and they had no one else to call up. I think that there is an argument for it. He needs to play. He's not good enough. He can't be relied on. But I don't think they want to leave themselves in a situation. And I think that's the major thing is that losing Kaden Primo, the player, is not that big of a deal, right? He's very unlikely to be a 1A, and 1Bs are pretty easy to find. Like
Yeah.
the issue, and I see people arguing about like, oh, you've spent all this time developing him. It's a waste to lose him. I don't care about that. In terms of just organizational depth, you need him in the organization, and you can't risk losing him because then you're going to be stuck in a situation where you have to trade for an Andrew Hammond or you have to trade for another goalie anyway. And on top of that, I think the best thing the Canadiens can do right now is trade a goalie to Edmonton. I think
Right.
that there's a lot of smoke there. I don't think they're the only team that Edmonton's looking at, but they're the most obvious ones. I think that you need to play that card if you get it. And does that make the team worse if they trade, say, Samuel Montalvo? Yes, it does. I don't think it matters though. I think that again, the benefits that you get for what you can get for him in a trade make it worth riding Allen and Primo, and maybe getting a goaltender back in the organization that you can send to Laval, on without clearing waivers, or you can replace that goalie so you have a better third goalie than Jakub Dobish. The Laval thing, I think, could make a difference, but I think the defensive situation there is so bad right now that no goalie is gonna turn things around there. Dobish has been playing better lately. Not great, but he's been playing better lately as well. It's not like the start of the season where he was really bad, adjusting to pro hockey. But yeah, I mean, I don't disagree that he's not an NHL goalie right now. But at the same time, they need a better third goalie in the organization right now, and I don't think, is it a slim chance that he gets claimed? Absolutely, I don't disagree with you there, but on the chance that he does get claimed, then you're chasing a goalie, and when you're chasing a
Yeah,
goalie,
but
it's not ideal
the thing is,
because they
if
don't have
they
they
were
don't
to
have
trade
forwards yet.
Primo, they'd be in the same situation anyway because you're not getting another goalie back plus a pick. So you're not benefiting really from that trade either. The only situation that makes sense to me with keeping Primo is if right away they end up making a blockbuster trade with Edmonton where another AHL goaltender is coming back, or like Jack Campbell is coming back and the Canadians offload Anderson at the same time so that they're not taking back salary. And even then, I'm not sure I want to touch Jack Campbell's term with his contract. Like I know Anderson has term left too, but I'm not sure if there's a situation where they're getting a goalie back in a trade that's clean anyway. So to me, I think it's easier to chase an American Hockey League goalie to help out Laval and have like a veteran to call up in case of emergency than it is to carry three goalies for this long. I feel like the opportunity cost is actually the other way around, where like if there is an injury, it's easier to solve a non-long-term solution in goal than it is to continually deal with this three goalie situation.
Yeah, I don't think Primo is the one who would get traded, just because I think his value is the lowest of the three goalies. But I think that you have to explore a trade that brings assets back. And a Montembeault or Allen trade would absolutely do that. And I think um, if you lose Primo for nothing, then that kind of limits you, because then you absolutely need a goalie back, because you not only need an AHL goalie, but you need an NHL option back as well. So it gets tricky. I think that I don't think that they're losing anything from having three goalies on the roster right now, because they have the flexibility of IR. They've already used that a couple of times. I don't, they have an extra forward as well. They have a guy like Armia who can go down without waivers as well. So I don't think that that's a big issue. Obviously, if Newhook is out at least a week, they can just put him on IR as well, and call somebody up. I don't think it's that big of a deal to have three goalies on the roster. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a tricky situation. I don't know what offers are out there. I don't know how deep they are in talks. Obviously, if they're not close, just send Primo down.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I think that's the big thing, right? Like if they have a deal in the pipeline, whether it's New Jersey who can't find a goalie to stop anything, and it seems like every goalie that leaves there seems to do much better, and they haven't figured out anything related to the goalie coach, maybe that might be a problem. Or Edmonton, who, at least tonight, I think they only allowed one goal so far against the Jets, but last I checked, we're losing. Yeah, still down 1-0. So uh, unless that's imminent and it's going to be a big deal that greatly benefits the organization, I think it's time to shit or get off the pot with the three goalie thing. I don't think it's, killing the team or anything. I just think it's annoying. And we need to stop having to deal
yeah,
with it. And, Mark is in the comments here, and he brought up that like sitting on veterans to try to like force players into the roster to try to get something later on the line is starting to be a pattern with Kent Hughes. And overall, like, that doesn't really frustrate me. It didn't frustrate me last year. But with this year, I think with the way that Anderson's been deployed and this three goalie situation, it's just time to speed up the process. And, if the difference is between netting a second round pick or a third round pick in a Jake Allen deal, I don't care. I think the only one where they would have to be really careful is trading Sam Montembeault, because I do think that he actually has really strong value right now around the NHL. And that isn't to say that he's going to be like a legitimate starting goaltender and the Canadians are giving up, a goalie of the future. I don't believe that Sam Montembeault is that. But I do think as an asset, he carries a lot of value and the Canadians can't rush that. So if that's the deal that's on the table, I get it. But man, we got to start seeing some dividends here paying off, because it's so annoying to watch.
Well, and also like the last like I think 9 games, they've just been rotating the three goalies, right?
Yeah.
Which is not ideal for anybody involved. And yeah, I mean, there's definitely issues there. And like I said, if a deal is not imminent, then absolutely just send them down. But if there is, and look, there's a lot of smoke right now. I mean, Edmonton doesn't send 3 people to watch a Columbus Montreal game, including a goalie scout, if they're not really interested, right? Like there's you don't bring 3 people to watch 2 of the worst teams in the league if you're not actively searching for a goalie, right? Like so I mean that's where a lot of what my process of thinking comes from. But yeah, I mean if there's nothing imminent and we don't know, we can't know unless we're confused, then I have no problem with putting Kaden Primo on waivers. Let
Yeah.
me finish off by saying that at least cover
Yeah,
my
yeah, I get you. I get you. And hopefully it is imminent, because this is like the situation has run its course in
and I,
my
and I
mind.
and I think he could really benefit your organization, right? Like I know that trading Sam Montembeault could be a mistake unless there's a really big offer, and I think that's what it would take. And I think that's where you have to start exploring that situation.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. All right, let's talk about the injury to Alex Newhook, because it looked really bad.
You mean
And
Abby's brother, right?
yes, Abby's brother. We'll touch on the PWHL as well before we shift to the questions. We'll try to go rapid fire here as much as we can, because I don't think we want to be here for a super long time after that game. And just based on the people in live right now, nobody really wants to be talking about this game
I
too
have the
much.
worst luck. I did the St. Louis game too. Like
Yeah, a couple of
it's
brutal ones. But at least they played well in this one
right. Yes,
overall.
it
Like
was a
I
much better
was
game than St. Louis. Yes.
I was kind of shocked when I looked at natural stat trick, and the Canadians had the high danger chances were 15-6 for the Canadians in all situations. Obviously, power play time helps with that. Expected goals, they had 60.5% of the expected goals in this game and lost 5-1. Shit happens. So there's something to talk about for there. But the Newhook injury, 3 times tonight, it looked like he got injured and went down the tunnel twice. The last one could not put any weight on his leg. It looked really serious. Newhook had just started kind of hitting his stride. Again, this sucks, Jared. Like, how many times are Canadians fans going to have to watch players that are important to the future go down with these major injuries right as things seem to be falling into place? It's nuts. It's nuts.
It's crazy. It's it's so similar to the Doc timing as well, right? Because
Yep.
Doc, he had a couple of scares where it looked like he might have gotten hurt, but he got back up and things like that. And then all of a sudden something happens and he gets hurt. And it is similar to that in this case, because it looked like a lot of times when he could have gotten hurt and he didn't. And then I don't think that he played hurt and that led to the injury, because it's very obviously an impact injury if you watch it. Like
Yeah.
it's not, it doesn't matter if he was 100% healthy. Going into a fall like that, you're gonna leave the game probably. Like it's not, unless you're like bionic leg person. But I mean it's
Freak
just
injury.
it's freak injury, and it's always the, not that I want to discount anybody else in the organization, but it's always the people who are big parts of the future. And at the same time of saying that, it's also because a lot more players playing in the NHL right now are potential components to the future, right? Like,
Yeah.
the defense is a good example of that. Like, there's nobody on the defense except for Gustav Lindstrom, who you wouldn't say is a significant part of this team or the team's future. And forward is pretty much the guys who play often, pretty much the same thing as well, right? If you look at those, Slavkovsky, and you can discount guys like Dvorak and Armia and you guys like that, but I mean, the the main guys those are the guys that are going to play. So the odds are that it's going to be one of those guys. But yeah, it sucks. Like, you can deal with the losses, you can deal with some injuries, but to have everything come back at like worst case scenario is getting kind of tiresome in year what 3 of this right now. Like, it's hard to watch because even if the team is losing, you want to see guys that are playing and developing. And if those guys start getting hurt, like last year, it's just, what are we doing here? like,
Yeah.
why do I want to watch Nick Suzuki in the Laval Rocket? And so it's tough. It's tough to
It's
watch,
tough,
and
and
it's tough for a guy for Newhook who, like you said, was playing his best hockey.
yeah, and it's not just the Canadians that have had this happen, right? Like in Laval, Heineman's out, Sean Farrell's out as of the other day. Elias Anderson's been out since the beginning of November. Like, there's not many options down there, and this is why, like, obviously Michael Pezzetta is going to get back in, and I don't believe he deserved to be scratched in the first place. But looking at Laval, there's not really much for call-up options outside of Joshua Waugh, and this is not a situation where you want to call up Joshua Waugh.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the good news is, I mean, they got the bad news of Farrell today out indefinitely, but the good news is that Heineman is cleared, and is expected to play this weekend,
That's
or
good.
this week. So, I mean, he's back. Gabriel Bork is back as well, but obviously that's not a call up option. Um, I think that, yeah, I mean, there aren't that many options for the Montreal Canadiens to call up right now. But I think if you don't want to put Joshua Waugh in that situation, there are guys at least. There's guys like Mitchell Stevens. Uh, there's Lucas Condota, who played an NHL game last year. Like, there's guys who can step up, be kind of that fourth line guy with Pizzetta and Evans, and kind of help the team. But yeah, there's not really much else.
Yeah.
But I do want to go off on a tangent a little bit and say that Jaden Struble has been outstanding,
Oh yeah, he
and
has.
and he's kind of been surprising a little bit, I think, because I don't think that many people expected him to play that well, but he was Laval's best D when he got called up, and he hasn't looked out of place, and it's kind of to the point where how can you send them back down? Also, so yeah, I mean, but yeah, it's tough, but they do have options. Not many options, but they are getting a little bit healthier. Obviously, if Heineman gets those 2 games in this weekend, he becomes an option as well down the road, once he gets back into game shape. So, yeah, it's not dire. It's not like last year or even a couple weeks ago when Laval had literally 12 forwards. 12 Gavial had exactly 10 forwards. Like, they were they were scraping the bottom of the Canadians had 12 forwards too. Like, everyone was like, they were exactly at the limit. But it's not that bad now with some bodies coming back. But yeah, I mean, next week I'll change over again. So you never know.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jaden Struble. He's an NHL player, and I know the book on Struble when he came out of college was he has all the tools, but they didn't kind of fit together right. Like, body of a physical specimen, right? I know that a lot of people on Habs Twitter have nicknamed him Greek God, which is
Wasn't it Trevor Timmons
hilarious.
who did that first?
Was it
Mark
Trevor
Bergevin?
Timmons? That is a very Trevor Timmons
It,
thing.
it, it sounds like a Trevor Timmons thing. Like, I feel comfortable enough to say that he probably said it first.
Yeah, and I
or,
always
or
thought
at
like
least said it to Mark Bergevin. Mark Bergevin said it. Like, one of the two
it
said
could
it for
be.
sure.
It could be for sure. I always wondered with Struble because, like, I don't watch a lot of college hockey, right? I haven't gotten a chance to before, like, this year, see him a lot. And because he's a black athlete, that, like, very toolsy, not very smart is it's like a racist trope in black players in all sports. You
Is he a
hear it about?
quarterback?
Yeah, so I always wondered if that was actually true or if it was just like a guy who is physically ready to go but just hasn't like hit his stride and put everything together, which look at Uri Slavkovsky, right? Like there's games where he's absolutely dominant, and then there's games like tonight where he makes a lot of good decisions, but the puck just keeps rolling off of his stick. And we wouldn't make those same comments about Uri Slavkovsky. So seeing him put everything together now and establish himself in a very short period of time as a guy who you can trust in multiple situations, who doesn't seem to have like he has ice in his veins in a lot of situations. He doesn't seem to be afraid to make high level plays in the NHL. That's found money. But aside from Jaden Struble, I will say Lindstrom should sit, and they need to give Matthias Norlinder a chance here because Lindstrom has not earned a spot on this team with the way he's played.
He I don't want to pile on him. Um, I have not seen him play a good game as a Montreal Canadian, and I just I he's the personification of a guy who is in the NHL because they don't want to call up some of their younger players.
Right.
Um, but they literally have Matthias Norlinder just sitting there. I think it's beyond time. I think honestly it was time on the California trip.
Agreed.
After the Anaheim game, that once Matthias Norlinder met them in and got a practice in, I think that was the time. It's beyond time now. I agree with you there.
Yeah, they got to try it at the very least. Mark says if Norlinder was a right A, he'd play, but St. Louis loves his left right. Yeah, that's a factor, but
They have guys that can
I
move
mean,
over though. It doesn't have to be
yeah,
Norlinder on the right. They can move somebody else over. I understand that that's what he's thinking. But I mean, in Laval, I mean they'd only had like one right D at one point. So like it's not a I'd almost rather him call up Brady Keeper than play Gustav Lindstrom anymore if it's that much of a right thing. But yeah, it's um yeah, I mean, you have Norlinder there playing.
yeah,
Um,
and like to be fair to Lidstrom as well, like no one should be expecting him to play top minutes with
no,
Mike Matheson. Like
no,
that's not a
especially a
situation
Mike Matheson
designed for
who's struggling.
success. Yeah,
It's
well,
also a Mike
I thought he was great
Matheson.
tonight,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah, yes, but in
But
general,
yes, in general, he's had a terrible season.
he's not a Mike Matheson that's carrying his partner either, right?
No,
Like so I mean, it's not a guy who could be like, come on my back, I'll play 25 minutes, you'll play with me, and we'll be okay. Um, he needs that partner to kind of solidify him. And yeah, he was better today, but I mean, in general, he's not a guy who can carry the load for him and his partner on the top pair.
yeah,
And that's nothing taking nothing against from Mike Matheson, but he needs somebody else there
yeah.
that
All
can
right, let's
support it.
shift away from the Canadians because they're boring. PWHL announced their schedule. What are you most excited about?
Seeing McAfee play 24 times a year. That's the easy answer, but no, just covering women's hockey in Montreal full time. Again, the Force were here last year. I'm not discounting what they did, but they only played 2 or 3 games in Montreal. It's not a Montreal team. It wasn't a Montreal
Right.
team last year. So I think having that back for 24 games, that's what I'm most excited about. It's going to be so much fun. Seeing a lot of faces that I haven't seen very often in a lot of years. It's great hockey. It's going to be on TV. It's going to be visible. Verdun Auditorium is a great place to see a game right now, and I think it's yeah, check it out when they start in January because it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I saw somebody saying that the season would be split between the Verdun Auditorium and Place Bell. Is it actually Place Bell or is it?
It is Place Bell.
It is Place Bell.
I the way that they're going, all the arenas are at least 2,500 seats,
Right.
so they're getting away from that playing in practice facilities. So I'm very confident in saying it's the main rink, not the community rink because they want to have those fans. They're selling season ticket packages with seats around the ice. It's definitely Place Bell main rink, but it's not quite a split. It's 7 games in Verdun, 4 Place Bell, 1 TBA, which happens to be a Saturday night that the Canadians are out of town. Maybe the Bell Center,
Interesting.
maybe a neutral site. It's not an out. I don't want to say it's absolutely the Bell Center, but it's available that night. But
Are the Canadians
it's
playing that night?
they're playing, but on the road.
Okay. It'd be
So
great if they weren't
it's
playing. You know, it'd be really cool to
yeah,
have like a game over meetup at the Bell Center for a PWHL game. That would be
yeah.
so fun.
Even Verdun or Place Bell, like
Yeah, we could do that too.
it's a great it's going to be a fun atmosphere. Like I'm really excited. The games are going to be on mostly on Saturdays, I think, during the day, but the schedule is out. It's there's a Tuesday night game in Laval. There's it's a good group of games, and it's going to be every team is going to be good. It's like watching an all-star game every night. That's the main takeaway, is that there's going to be players that you're watching it like this seems like an all-star game. I remember the first time I saw Canada and Team USA play live, and you're looking at the ice and you see all these players, and it's like an all-star game, and that's what this is going to be like every team has Olympians, great college players that you don't haven't heard of yet, that you probably will hear of by 2026 as well. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to finally have a league where there's going to be a spotlight on these players because they deserve it.
Yeah, a league that is serious about, you know, making money
Yeah,
for these players as well,
yeah,
and treating
and
them properly.
yeah, that's the big thing. Like I want to quickly just talk about the elephant in the room, get on a soapbox a little bit.
Sure.
There's a lot of talk about the logos and the branding and the things like that, and the jerseys and things like that. And I kind of like that they're an afterthought. I know that they're important long term. Like, don't get me wrong. It'd be great to have a team name as opposed to calling them Montreal all the time. But for season one, I don't think it really matters. Uh, but I think that all women's hockey professionally in North America has so long been portraying strength but being chaos behind the scenes,
Right.
kind of like the duck on a pond, where up above the water, like, we are the best league and we are professional, and behind the scenes it's like three volunteers running around, like paddling around. um I kind of like that outwardly they're being like, we're gonna screw up, we're gonna mess up, and behind the scenes people are already getting paid full time. Like, it's such a reversal of portraying a long-term vision, um, that I think it's hard for people to take them seriously, or at least it was maybe before a schedule came out and things like that. But I think now that the focus is going to be on games, you're going to see the difference. And don't judge them based on the jerseys and the logos and the lack of team names. Like, it's I understand the importance. I understand people want to get excited about things like that. They are important long term, but getting a league started in a few months, and being able make that happen, is a feat in itself, and I think that it portrays a long term vision that women's hockey at a professional level in North America has just not had.
Yeah, I do think it's a bit of a fumble to not have team names. I'm not too concerned about the jerseys. I think that it's pretty like EA Sports generic team, which kind of stinks.
Yeah,
But at the same time, I feel like we can't hold the standard for this startup league to like the NHL or the NBA or the MLB, because these are leagues that have existed for a hell
yeah.
of a long time. And
I
I
mean,
think for people who are frustrated with the jerseys, like I get it, I am too, but the Montreal Canadiens didn't design their iconic jersey for like 5 or 6 years after they entered the league. Their first jersey was blue with a big C on it. They had a maple leaf on it before the Maple Leafs existed. So I do
that's
think
the
there
whole
is a
thing.
little bit of leeway that has to be given from a design perspective, but I do
Yeah.
think not having team names kind of sucks.
Like, obviously we're in a different world from 1917. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. We're in a different world than 1917, but at the same time, the NHL, when it started, all their logo, all their jerseys were a letter. There was a T for Toronto, an M for the Maroons, a C for the Canadians. Uh, the Toronto team, when they played their first game in 1917, they didn't even have a name yet.
Yeah.
So and just, we do live in a different world. Social media, like, you expect better, and obviously that's understandable, and I understand what people are saying that, but for team names in particular, waiting is better than getting it wrong.
That
and,
yeah.
and I think that, if the names came out and they were the names that were reported or trademarked, um,
Yeah, it was
would
like a
be
Montreal
worse.
Echo or whatever.
The Montreal Echo, which made me think of Olympic Stadium instantly. and that's not a good thing.
I wonder if the
So
reaction to those names are kind of why everything was put on hold.
I think that's a part of it. I think also they were trademarked before they brought in their VP of business operations, and she is the person who is really running the branding and things like that. So it's a little bit of tomato tomato, but I think it's also important that they get it right, even if that's a year two thing. And look, year two, season two will have already started a year from now. Like we have to remember, this is a late start. Year one's a shortened season. It's only 24 games instead of 32. Like a year
Like
from now,
starting with a lockout.
yeah, like basically, I mean, technically they kind of did because the whole PWHP was a labor movement,
Yep.
so, in a way, right? So, I mean, yeah, basically that's basically what's happening, and they have to start a league. Like, if this was an expansion team joining a league, absolutely unacceptable to not have a team name. But having to start a league from scratch, it's and six teams and things like that, it's a bigger ask. And I think it's more important they get it right. And the big scheme of things, a year from now, we're going to be talking about season two already starting. Like that's how quickly things are going right now. And so I think that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's transition into some questions because we have a
Mhm.
couple on the PWHL in general that I think are great or a good way to start. Trinka asks, or not really asks, but says, as someone from Toronto who cheers for the Habs, I'm torn as to whom to cheer for in the PWHL. I feel like maybe wait and see, but I'm really expecting Montreal to win me over. But Sarah Nurse and Natalie Spooner. Counterpoint, though, Mary Philippe Poulin. Like, Mary Philippe Poulin, come on. Like, you don't need anything else. It's Montreal all the way.
Yeah, I mean, look, you could go down every team. They have people who are superstars in their own right. Like, Boston having Hillary Knight, who used to play in Montreal, by the way. Just throwing that out there. New York having Abby Rock and Alex Carpenter. Minnesota having Taylor Heise and Lee Steckline and Kendall Coyne Schofield. Like, anywhere you go, you're gonna find a women's hockey player you admire, whether you're American or Canadian. It's just the way things are. I think that Montreal has a connection to the Canadians in terms of benefit of play, like literally working for the team.
Yep.
But I think there's going to be a lot more coordination. I don't think it's that far off for being a Montreal fan in Toronto, but also look, if you're I know people who cheer for the Habs and cheer for Toronto in women's hockey, and I completely understand that. Like Sarah Nurse and Natalie Spooner are great. Like, even if you're closer to Ottawa has a great team. Like
Yeah.
Brianne Jenner, Emerald Smashmeyer, Emily Clark, three of the best people I've dealt with in women's hockey. Like, so I mean, yeah, they're all good teams. Like I said, they're all-star teams. You look at any team, you're going to find players you like, and so maybe that's where you start. If you're a Sarah Nurse fan, maybe you start with Toronto. The good news is that it's a small league. The good news is that it's going to be visible, so you can pick your own team. You're not going into a situation where you're looking at 20 teams like, what do I choose? So I think it's going to be easy to get in on the ground floor. But yeah, McAfee play. Not say anything else.
Yeah, it's hard to argue Mary Philippe Poulin. It's Mary Philippe Poulin. Like,
Unless you're American, I guess. Kind
yeah,
of.
I mean, even Americans can't deny, right? Like, how many golden goals does one person need before it's, ridiculous? But yeah, I think when I'm looking at this whole thing, like every team is going to be really fun to watch. Every team has headline star players in this. It's going to be really, really fun. Trizak had a question here. Did I lose it? Uh, I did lose it, didn't I? Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. Who scores first? Josh Anderson or one of the goalies? Obviously referencing uh, Tristan Jerry scoring tonight in Pittsburgh, outscoring Josh Anderson. It's rough. You know what I think?
I honestly I thought he was going to ask who's going to score first, Josh Anderson or Rally for play, who doesn't play until January 2nd. I,
Yeah, I who
I thought
scores
that's where
first?
that question was going. I'm not going to lie. I do think I don't think you can bet on a goalie scoring first, especially a Canadians goalie, just because of how bad they play when the other team pulls their goalie. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't want to pile on Josh Anderson, but I mean, ugh,
Yeah, I
eventually, I
know.
mean, Uh,
You know what I think though? After that fight tonight, he scores next game, which will
I
be Mark Dumas hosting with Prashant Iyer taking on the Detroit Red Wings. So that's going to be a fun one. They can compare rebuilds.
talking about Ben Sherratt and Jeff Petrie.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh man, I mean, here, if you want to end the show on a good note, because we're not getting a ton of questions coming in. If you're a Montreal Canadiens fan and you're upset at the pace of the rebuild, look across the border at the Detroit Red Wings under the supposed genius Steve Yzerman. They're not really going anywhere.
Look at
Patrick
Buffalo. Look
Kane
at
or not.
Ottawa. Look at Buffalo. Look at Ottawa. Like
Yeah.
like they were all expected to make a push, and the only team that's even in the picture right now is Detroit, kind of, because Tampa has been so bad. But I mean that's a real concern for all three of those franchises, because Montreal has a little bit more leeway because they're still in the early process. A lot of their top talent hasn't even made the NHL yet. But I mean,
Yeah.
eventually, you need to start having results, and those three teams have not been having results, and it's kind of scary because they've all kind of accelerated. Buffalo not so much, but they've been in it for longer. So
Yeah. I mean, it's been what, a
it's kind of
decade?
like yeah, I mean they haven't tried to make the big moves like Ottawa and Detroit have, but also they've been in that place for like 15 years, I want to say. So
Yeah.
it's been a while. Like Jack Eichel was drafted in what, 2005? So, and that wasn't the start of the
No, no,
rebuild either.
not 2005.
No,
That
2015.
was the
Sorry.
Crosby draft. Jack
2015.
Eichel's
I, I
36
I
years
I
old.
forgot to carry the one. I forgot to carry the one. But
Oh
yeah,
man.
I mean, 2015 is still almost 10 years ago, and that wasn't the start of their rebuild either, right? So, yeah, I mean, I don't want to use a French term, but ça presse. Like
Yeah.
you need to start going a little bit. Like so I mean, it's bad. Montreal's in not a great situation, but I wouldn't want to be in those three teams or situations either, because if they're not winning now, when will they? Would you need another top five pick, another two? Like what do you need more to get going? And it's a question that I don't want to have the answer to. Like I'm glad I'm not their GMs.
Yeah, yeah, it is tough. I do have confidence in Buffalo specifically because they employ so many smart people that
Yes,
it
they
like
also
you
have more
look at
prospects. They also have
yeah,
more, like their prospects are still coming up, right?
legit.
They have a lot of depth in that pool as well.
Yeah.
Whereas Ottawa and Detroit are kind of like, who's not in the NHL right now? Like Simon Edmondson, like he's not going to make a big difference. Like he's not
No,
the guy
no.
who's going to turn that around.
That yeah, that's the big thing, right? Is those teams don't have the backup coming in, whereas like Buffalo
Yeah,
just added Zach Benson, they're gonna have Matt
yeah,
Savoy. Like they have
yeah,
the pieces that Buffalo has are, in my mind, significantly better and more important. Devin
mhm,
Levi when he hits, which I
yeah.
fully believe he will,
Yeah, I
is
think
going to be
Buffalo's
incredible.
big problem is that they bet on Levi and he wasn't ready yet,
Yeah,
and that's where that's why they're in the situation they're in. Like I do have more faith in them, but they were expected to take a jump,
yeah,
and
it hasn't
it just
happened.
shows how goaltending is so important when
Yeah,
you don't
and
have that.
frankly, I think if you want to take it on a negative note, you look at those three rebuilds and realize like the path forward for the Canadians is not necessarily linear, right? There's going to be
It's
bumps in the
not
road.
linear, but also it's not all about top talent either, because all those three teams have arguably that top talent. Like Ottawa has,
I don't know if
you know,
Detroit does,
no, not as much. I mean, but they have Larkin, they have the Brink, like they have the older part, not like in
yeah,
that rebuild nucleus.
but like their
Um, you
top
know,
young player is Cider,
Lucas
and like
Raymond,
he's
Raymond
good.
and Cider, yeah.
Yeah, and like Raymond's good, but like is
Mhm.
Lucas Raymond better than Cole Caulfield? I don't think so.
I think a lot of people who think negatively about the Canadians, and I include fans into that, would say yes. But I also think no, personally. Um, but I think, yeah, I think that's the big question about Detroit, and also they've gotten really old in some of their signings, like Petrie and Sherratt. Like those are people that Montreal didn't want anymore, and
Yeah.
Montreal was even a little bit farther. Like it's just it, it's a tough situation, and I talked to a Red Wings fan podcaster before the season started. I'm like, do you fear that one of those three will have to rebuild again before they make the playoffs? And he's like, yes, and I think it's us.
Yeah,
um,
that sucks. That's a
and
terrible feeling. Because
yeah.
like that's what Buffalo is. Buffalo is a second straight rebuild, right? The Eichel
Mhm.
rebuild failed, and now
Yes.
they're on to another rebuild. That sucks. It sucks to live through as a fan. So hey, shout out to those franchises. But let's wrap this up, Jared, because we went way longer than this game frankly
We always do.
deserved. And thanks so much for joining me again. Thanks everyone for joining me, and Jared, of course, on the show live. It means a lot to us to chat with you every single game. And the next show is going to be Mark, which will be really fun on Saturday. I will see you in a week, a little bit more than a week, because my parents are coming to visit and they're going to sleep in this room that I record in. So I don't want to be moving the camera every day. All right. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.